we changed who we were looking at, as in who our avatar was. In the past, we had always looked for the typical Australian trained GP that wants to work in general practice for the next 50 years. And that wasn't real. That wasn't realistic. And when we looked at our success stories, we had a couple of doctors who were overseas trained doctors. They moved to this area. It was literally a pin on a map, and they put their roots down. And so we decided that our success was our training, our ability to train, because we're bloody good and we're quite passionate about that. And we either needed people who had roots here or no roots at all. And that was our real game changer in how we evolved our recruiting strategies.
Hey, welcome back to the Scale My Clinic podcast. I'm super excited today to welcome Julie Thomson, who is business manager and owner at Yeppoon Family Practice and some others. Welcome, Julie.
Hey, Sachin, how are you?
Awesome. Yeah, good to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know you've got a lot of wisdom to share, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your journey. So we might just get started, Julie. Maybe for those who haven't met you before, just give us an intro about you and how you got into general practice, like where your journey in general practice started.
Look, I suppose if you want to go way, way, way back into the beginning, I originally trained as an RN. I've been in health administration for a long time, worked in divisions of general practice, the old previous PHN type things. And that's what got me probably more attached into general practice. So working with GPs in that as project officers, etc. I managed divisions of general practice federally for a little bit. And then I got called to Central Queensland, and where I was working with the local division of general practice and got to know the GPs in the area. And got into general practice because I moved on to bigger and better things. And one of my doctors here, Dr. Michael Donoghue, kept giving me a call every couple of years and trying to tempt me to come over and work as their practice manager. And one year I just succumbed. So that was 14 years ago, and I'm, almost 15 years now. And yeah, so long story long, that's how I sort of got into general practice. And the funniest thing is, when I worked in divisions, I said I'd never work in general practice because they're so disorganized. And I think it's just funny when I reflect back on that now, how much life has changed. And yep, I'm married to general practice now.
Awesome. There you were. You're helping and leading the divisions of general practice. There's always change in general practice, and I know back in the day it would have been the case as well. You get a knock on your phone every couple of years, and then at some point comes the call, 2010-ish, so 15 years, and you get the call from Dr. O'Donoghue saying, Dr. O'Donoghue, will you come this time? And then you said,
well, look, it was a moment of weakness, I'm sure. No, look, I had young children and the time was just right, and I hadn't worked in general practice before. My experience was from an outsider looking in. It was a time when general practice wasn't very organised and coordinated, but I remember we're having fond memories of this practice going, if anyone's got their act together, these guys do. And I really liked the people who owned the business. So Michael Donoghue was one of them, and I really respected him. And I thought, okay, I'll give this a go. So I came in with really no practice management experience whatsoever. As I said, I come from a nursing and health administration background. And so it was a little bit of finding my way. But I think that probably was a strength in some ways because I hadn't come homegrown. So I came in with a broader mindset going, there's different ways to do things.
awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to give any spoilers, but you are now business manager and owner. So that story is where we're going to end up as we go.
Yes.
So there you are. You're in, you've got fresh eyes. Take us through that. Like, how long did it take you to settle when you came in?
I don't know if I don't know. I don't think there's a set question about, answer about when you were settled, but I'm a very much a challenge motivated person. So, I just got in and it was great because I didn't know general practice. I had no preconceived ideas. It was a lot of time invested in getting to know the team, getting to know what works, what doesn't work, how our owners work, that sort of thing. And then we just evolved from there. And over 14 years, almost 15 years, there's always been plenty of challenges to keep us going and motivated and things like that. So, yeah, I don't know, probably, I suppose fairly a good 6 months to sort of find my feet and get a bit of a picture of where we're going. But, we had a strong team at the time too. So I think that helped. And we're much smaller than what we are now.
Absolutely. And so when you came in that first year, how many sites did you have then?
We actually had 3 sites. So we had Yeppoon, which is by far our biggest practice. We had a very small 1.5 doctor practice at Zilsey. And we just bought 6 months to me starting a practice at Emu Park. And that was a accidental purchase. It wasn't a planned decision. It was just a doctor was leaving and otherwise the practice would be shut. So they decided to buy it. So we had 3 sites, but Emu Park and Zilsey were exceptionally small. We've since amalgamated those over the years and tripled the size of our Emu Park practice.
Nice. And so when you came in, so you had the 3 sites, 2 pretty small. You said Yeppoon was the biggest. How many doctors at that time?
Look, probably, let me think about that. We probably had about maybe 8, probably not all full-time capacity either. That's at our Yeppoon site. And our Emu Park site, we probably only had maybe 2 on and off. Recruitment was always an issue. And our Zilsey site, as I said, was 1.5. But Yeppoon, probably, anywhere between 6 and 8 if I'm thinking back now. Largely it was our owners who own the practice were the people who worked in here, with the odd registrar and things like that thrown in.
Okay. So you would have had 6, 7 owners when you joined?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Cool. And then, so probably then, hopefully I'm listening right. So maybe the first big thing you did was the amalgamation of the merging of the.
No, the first big thing we did is we were outgrowing our practice size. So we secured a federal funding and we increased our Yeppoon practice. So it doubled its size in footprint. So expanding front and back. That was probably our first really big initiative here. And then as soon as that was finished, we got some funding to do the same at our Emu Park site. So we rebuilt and amalgamated the practices. Somewhere in there, we had an opportunity to fall on our doorstep to buy a skin and cosmetic practice in Rockhampton. And that was a ridiculously good opportunity that we went in completely blinded with no idea. And that was very obvious for the first 5 years because it took us a long time to make that a viable business. So that's sort of when that sort of third practice sort of came in by accident in between all that happening.
Nice. And so obviously there you are, you're expanding, you're taking on funding and being able to expand your footprints and acquired a practice. So a fair amount of growth at this point in terms of size and probably quite a lot of commitment financially as well. Even though you've got external funding, there's internal commitments.
Oh, absolutely. It does. It still costs. That's right. Yes.
Mm. And so what was the driving force behind that in terms of what was the motivation as part of the growth, would you say?
Look, I think it was twofold. We had grown as a practice. It was also a bit of opportunity as well. This opportunity presented itself and we thought, let's go for it. So we were already sort of starting to bust at the seams. The practice was quite a few years old. It did need a refit. But we expected this to be a 10-year lifespan, before we needed to. But we really had it full, initially within the first few years, which was quite impressive. Like, it took us a while. And look, recruitment had always been an issue for us, like on and off for, I don't know, I think like we talked about, we'd been with Scale My Clinic for 5 years now. So for 10 years, recruitment was always an issue in one frame or another. So yes, that was all part of sort of growing our practices. So yeah, I think just opportunity for growth as well. It's always what we wanted to do. Growing community. We've, this community since I've been here in the last 20 years has just exploded. Yeah.
Right. So serving the needs of the community was
without question. Yeah, absolutely.
You sort of joined, you bedded in, you've done the construction projects and you've done the acquisition and a merger in the middle. Now, like, how many years in are you to
Gosh, we probably finished our construction of Emu Park probably the year prior to COVID or just leading into COVID. So that's about 2019, 2020, just to give a bit of context. So before our Project X days. And yeah, so that's sort of 5-6 years ago now.
Okay, cool. And so now we are. So this is where we meet, right? So we met in 2020. Where were you at then? Like, so maybe obviously you've told us, you've acquired, you've grown, you gave a hint, recruitment is obviously a bit of a challenge, but you've grown and you've started to fill the space. We're at 2020. What were the big sort of problems or conundrums or challenges or opportunities that you were trying to tackle?
The biggest issue was recruitment. At the end of the day, like, we had good success recruiting doctors. We were a great teaching practice. Doctors stayed with us, etc. But we always lost doctors, as in the call back to the big smoke or family or whatever the case is. So that retention was our issue. And we'd grown our practice footprints on both sides. We had empty rooms. So that was probably our number one issue. And we'd also, because even though we still had empty rooms, etc., we still had grown and multiplied in sites, and our processes were still clunky and customized to individual doctors rather than being systematic and things like that. And trust me, we're still not 100% with some of that stuff now. But that were probably our biggest issues was really around recruitment. And I suppose the other thing, which we didn't realise until we started into Project X, is how much of an issue alignment was within our ownership group, but also within our business as such. And so that was a bit of a learning curve once we started with Project X, and we've probably invested a lot into building that alignment strength over the years.
Absolutely. And so you're at this stage where recruitment is an issue, number one, and then processes are a bit sort of clunky or a bit individualized across the board, and still that's a constant challenge, I think, for anyone in general practice. And so what were the impacts of that? So say if we start with recruitment, how was that showing up and how was that affecting, the business, the community, the other doctors?
Yeah, so we had a hugely expanding community very quickly, and COVID just made that, expedite that incredibly. But early days, it was taking the toll on the doctors that were here. So we had a minimum of 6-week waiting list for an appointment, and that was any type of an appointment. And it was just incredibly stressful for those that were working here because they felt the pressure as well as the owners, just everyone was. So, and as I said, every time that we thought we had success, we had this time where all of a sudden, just for a series of unfortunate events, we lost a number of doctors all at once. Family members getting old and, passing away, and babies on the way, and, just a whole range of different things. And so we just, all of a sudden, there was this crisis moment. And I remember having a conversation, I actually think it was with you, Sachin, going, oh my gosh, we've got help on the way. Like, we've been recruiting, we've got some people coming, no idea whether they're going to be long-termers, but we really stopped and took a moment and re-examined what we were doing with recruitment. As I said, I've been with the business 10 years by this stage, and recruitment had always been an issue. We'd had success, but not in retention. And I remember having a conversation with Todd and yourself that really changed my mind, going, we really need to have a bit of a self-reflection about what are we doing, what's working, what's not working. And it was that moment that we really changed the way we did our recruiting. In the past, we had largely been doctor owner led, but in reality, they weren't the ones making the connections, and it had to be a connection piece with recruiting. So we changed who we were looking at, as in who our avatar was. So in the past, we would always looked for this, it's horrible to say now, but, the typically Australian trained GP that wants to work in general practice for the next 50 years and be like the doctors that we had here for the last 50 years. And that wasn't real. That wasn't realistic. And when we looked at our success stories, we had a couple of doctors who were overseas trained doctors. They moved to this area. It was literally a pin on a map, and they put their roots down. And so we decided that our success was our training, our ability to train, because we're bloody good and we're quite passionate about that. And we either needed people who had roots here or no roots at all. And that was our real game changer in how we evolved our recruiting strategy. So very much changed that focus and changed the way we did things. So I did a lot of that recruitment. It was all about coaching and relationship building and things like that. And rather than our doctors sort of always being rushed and not really engaging in the process as much as they would have liked to. And it paid off for us. Yeah, we did well. We did well out of it. And
Absolutely.
have continued to.
Cool. We'll come to that in a second. And so there we are. Recruitment has been an issue. It's taking its toll on the people who are there. So, draining. We've started to think about, look, we really need to change how we do that. And then processes, a bit clunky or a bit quite variable, depending on the doctor. What was the impact of that, especially for you as a manager now with 3 sites at that point, sort of trying to...
Absolutely. And as we grew, and we grew very quickly, big cracks opened, and we used to have Dr. Such and such does something this way and that this way and this way. So we couldn't manage that anymore. So it meant that our things fell over realistically, and we needed to tighten up our game about how we approach things and became a lot more systemized about how we approach things, but trying not to lose that. One of the things that we're proud of is that very personal touch with our GPs and trying to make sure we develop what they need in their business and support them well. That was just something that we needed to work through, and we're continuing to work through as we get bigger and out of control at times. But as we build our practice and trying to get more structure to the way we do things, and there's there's always something we can do better.
Absolutely. And so that's recruitment and processes. And then you mentioned you had insight that actually alignment needs some work.
Yeah, we had a really large ownership group. So we had 7 doctors. And, one of our owners has been here has just been here 39 years as part of this practice. And a lot of our owners had been here for a long time. And realistically, if you worked in the practice, you bought a share in the practice. Often you were given a share in the practice or whatever the case is. It was a way of attaching someone to the business, and you reap the rewards as such from that. Not that there was a great deal of reward at that stage. So we had a large ownership group, and it shouldn't have worked. I mean, they're very different in all the ways very different in different stages of life, different attitudes in life, all that sort of thing. But they did have some underlying core values that realistically bound them together. But they weren't aligned. There was a lot of conversations that would happen at, white-handing of things or corridor conversations. And, we wouldn't get far on things because we weren't all on the same page, all on the same ship, rowing the same direction sort of thing. So over the last 5 years, we've had a bit of movement, ownership group, a lot of reflection on, how we travelled, where do we want to go. We've had some movement in our ownership group, and I think that has helped with part of the alignment as well. Not that was the reason why we weren't aligned. It's just changing of personalities and people are at different stages wanting different things from their life. So that reflected in the business as well. So a lot of time invested in that, but also we have a large ownership group, but not everyone's actively involved. So we have, as I said, we had 7 owners. We now have 6 owners, and myself is one of those. And we probably only have 3 that are actively involved in the management and growth of the business, and the others are workers. They're here, they're doing the hard yards, etc. And that works. There's trust and, come together. We know where everyone wants to head generally, and it works.
Nice. And so I think this is probably something that those watching or listening may experience, because I think it's very common. Sometimes the lack of alignment, I think, isn't necessarily on purpose or anything like that. It's often like you had 7 busy GPs who probably were of a vintage where they are on the tools, like fully on the tools. And so management or running the business is something you do on the side. It's not my main gig. My main gig is I've got to see the patients and look after the community. And so I think it can sometimes just be that it's not done intentionally around alignment. It's sort of something you do by default or reactively in between all your other commitments. Is that how it was for you, would you say?
I couldn't agree more. I think you're right. Everyone was working full time, full on, absolutely. And their business was their own practice, not the practice, if that makes sense. So working in and versus working on, and the business really wasn't a business. The business was really just a partnership of a few bodies working together. And if there's any excess, well, we split that at the end, or it was more like split the risk. There wasn't any profits in it, to be perfectly honest. So it was a very different mindset. It wasn't about developing the practice as a business unit that had value. It was an asset. It was really just a way of getting a pretty good tax write-off with how you manage your income and things like that. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, so I've got a really clear picture of where we were 5 years ago, and you've given us some hints. Great marketing, because you're going to tell us a bit later how you became an owner. But how did you go about sort of solving these three big problems that you talked about: alignment, processes, and recruitment as being? I know you've done much more, but what did you do? What frameworks did you apply? What tools did you use? What actions did you take? Like, just talk us through the
Yeah,
things that are big
sure,
for you.
sure. I suppose recruitment is probably our number one thing. And as I said, yeah, and Scale My Clinic was really valuable in that because it really held up a mirror and we had to think and look differently at ourselves, going, hang on, we're getting in our own way here. So it was probably before the recruitment funnel work and all that stuff that Scale My Clinic does, but it was more so that self-reflection, going, what's working and what's not working? Who's our avatar? Who is our ideal GP and why do we need to attract them? And it's really changed our mindset. And we had some really good wins early days, so that made a big difference. If we'd had some disastrous wins, I'm sure that would have made a very big difference to where we are now. We probably would have squashed that. So I can't say that there was a specific framework as such, but I do think that whole reflection was really important because we'd been doing the same thing, expecting a different outcome for years, and we weren't getting it. So that was really valuable. The other side of that is because we had this major stress, like this pressure pot within the practice team, we really engaged in using things like whiffles and having those conversations with the team. Because I remember at one point, like we knew we had doctors coming in 6 to 8 weeks. I didn't think we'd have a business in 6 to 8 weeks because all our doctors were at that point of just utter exhaustion, ready to walk, couldn't do anything. And I remember going in and doing all the prep and prepping all our owners to go, Whiffle, we're just here to listen. We don't need to defend. We just want to try and get, this is where we need to go. And I just remember walking out of that meeting going, I can't believe that worked. And we actually got a very different outcome to what we expected, because we expected to be just pulverized by our team, etc. But they all, when we sort of went, where are your pain points? What can we do to help you? This is where the light is at the end of the tunnel. They actually came back and were able to give us more and do more, and which was never even considered would be an option. But it just was so powerful to get that connection. It was amazing, really was amazing. And then obviously we started having this sort of new doctor stream coming in, and it just, solved that problem moving forward anyway. So that was really cool. With alignment, I don't know, it seemed to go on forever.
Herding cats.
Yeah. I think, look, to be honest, it was just calling a spade. And look, Mick Donoghue, he was always quite an advocate and trying to get together. He could see that we needed to do some work in this area as well. So it was just slowly chipping away. But I don't know if anyone really necessarily saw it as an issue. I could see the misalignment of everything going on, but I don't know if everyone else necessarily appreciated how challenging that was at times, when you've got sort of white anting happening and, people playing each other off. It's just awful. The back doors, if I want something wrong and I can't get this way, I'll go around the back way to get it done, sort of thing. But I just think it was just slowly chipping away and calling things out a little bit. We invited Paul Copeland to come and do a strategic planning session with us. He was not my first he was not anyone's first preference, actually. And I know that one of our owners didn't particularly like Paul because he's pretty much in your face and all the rest of it. But after we spoke to a couple of different people, and I've gone, you know what, I actually need Paul, because Paul came in and just dropped a grenade. in that first planning meeting. It was incredible. We're sitting there and, half the people hadn't turned up, and he sort of said, well, what are you planning to do about that? And everyone just sat there stunned, going, well, we don't hold each other accountable. We're like, why would we do that? So that was really powerful, picking the right person to come in. And he really did. He wasn't afraid to drop the grenades, as I said, but then he helped us shift a way forward. Now, where we came out of that is actually not where we are now, but it gave us the starting point. And, for some of our GPs, our owners, like one of them actually made a decision at that point going, well, actually, I want to exit. Not now, but that's where I want to go. And we'd already had one already starting to exit, but, that sort of sealed that deal as well. So it was really interesting that it just helped them think a little bit laterally, thinking about where did their futures want to be, thinking about the business as a business, because we really hadn't ever thought of ourselves as a business. I remember the day we were super excited because I think we made, I don't know, something like $120,000 profit. And it was like, that was a big deal. And I'm going,
in a year.
Yeah, in a year.
Right.
And that might sound like a reasonable amount, but we were running a very large business with a lot of income, and we were not making, that was the biggest profit ever. Wow. That was, and then obviously just that growth and changing. COVID was a friend of ours because while the world was imploding, we actually shone. We have strengths in being adaptable and putting systems in place. We changed the way we operate here on a dime. We were delivering more COVID vaccines than the public health system here. We made more money that year than we'd ever made. And so that made, I suppose it made us think that, well, these are the options. This is what we could do in the future. We could think smartly about how we do things rather than think, and our business could be a business that has value. So as I said, at that point, we had a couple of owners who were already starting to look at exiting. One was a bit further down the road, was looking to have someone buying, because that's how we exit here. You either, someone comes in and someone goes out, and there might be an exchange of money, and it definitely isn't very much generally because the value wasn't there in the business. So it was a great opportunity to, as I said, and once again, I suppose it comes back to that, challenging the way we're doing things and reflection of how we've done things. But it was great that moment when we had that session with Paul, we came out with our 2-year plan. We started to come out with what our purpose is and our values and our vision of where we want to go. Now, that has evolved significantly since that moment in time, but it got us talking about stuff, and it got us talking about where do we want to go in the future. And we were started to get on the same page. And, since then we've had I think it was 2 years back now. I've lost my track of thinking, but we had another, a lot's happened since that first meeting with Paul. I think it was about a year after that. And we redid, and we did a 2-year plan. And that plan looked very different to where we started, but it really showed where we were at. And it was this hairy, audacious, goal. But we're working, we're kicking goals, we're getting there.
Awesome. And so what I'm hearing there is, with the recruitment, you got to a point where you were stuck and you're like, I don't even know if we'll be able to open in 8 weeks. And you did the whiffle process, what I feel like expressing with your team. I still remember that conversation. I think it was a Wednesday morning. And you saying, look, I'm really stuck. We know we've got people coming, but I just don't know how we're going to cope in this time. So obviously you went and did what we talked about, and thankfully you got a great result out of that. And then you had people coming, and then we'll talk about where that's taken us so far. And then with alignment, I think obviously you had a skilled facilitator in Paul Copeland from William Buck, and we've interviewed Paul before. I'll put the link in the show notes for anyone who wants to hear from Paul. And so having a skilled facilitator, especially when you've got a large group, to get people aligned, willing to say the tough things, to start the tough conversations, because it's the other side of the tough conversation.
And it probably was a wolf in sheep's clothing as well, because Paul came in probably with a financial hat on as our facilitator, but realistically the underlying goal was getting alignment and a goal forward. So there was a little bit of that as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Ends justify the means, right?
Absolutely.
And so there you are. And then obviously you built a 2-year plan. You started to think about things differently. And then you recently sort of rebuilt that. Maybe take us through now. Where are you at? Like today, like you said, you've kicked some goals. You're now part of the ownership group.
That
Talk us through
wasn't
the
one
next
of the
bit.
2-year plan. That wasn't part of the
Right.
2-year plan as such.
Yeah.
But it was around about the same time. So, as in within our plan, like we were probably, we're a reasonably sized business. We were turning over around, I think our best year was 9 mil. And we said by, I think it was 2 years' time, up in 3 years' time, we want to be turning over 20 mil. We want to have a third site. We want to do this. We want to have so many doctors. We want this to be their average income. We want this to be, and just spelt out. And it was very simple in that respect. It was just pie in the sky. This is where we'd like to be. And then part of that was one of our owners going, well, I want to leave in 3 years' time and I want $1 million for my share and I need to be turning over this amount for that to be happening. Like, it was all tongue-in-cheek conversation. We're going, well, if that's what you want, let's make it happen. And interestingly enough, our value, we're almost hitting that point, as in the share of our business, which is a huge significance. So, and having that 2-year plan, especially that second one with this huge goal there, it really changed the way we thought about things. Going, well, you can't achieve that working the way we do. We filled all our rooms. There's no way for us to generate that. So the only way we can generate that income is to open another practice or to do this or to do that. And so those decisions then became, they were still decisions that needed contemplation, but it became a no-brainer and going, well, yeah, if we want to do that, we need to do A plus B to get to C. And so it made our decision making, and we were just all on the same page, going in the same direction. So that's sort of some of the things, I suppose, about where we're going now. And look, we've still got another year or so to go, so we're not quite there yet, but we're probably 3/4 of the way there, which is awesome. So as I said, we went from 8 or 9, 10 maybe turnover. Well, last year I think we turned over 18. So we're not far away from our 20. We're getting there. So, and we've got work to do. Don't get me wrong, we've got work. And we've just opened a new practice, and obviously that's not fully functional yet, so that'll cut into our expenses. And, we're not there yet, but we're getting there. And it allowed us to be bold in our thinking and bold in our decision-making as well, which is awesome. About a couple of years ago, when we started having these discussions about where to in the future, the first lot of sort of strategic thinking, I had one doctor who was definitely exiting, another doctor that decided they were exiting, one who said that they were probably looking at 3 to 5 years, another one that probably never wants to retire but would need to at some point in his future. And all these sort of things. And for me personally, I was sitting there going, crap, what does this mean for the future? And the other owners that were sort of a younger age bracket weren't actively involved and really didn't have an interest in being actively involved. So that was one of those moments where I'm going, okay, what is the future? And so I started doing a bit of self-reflection about, for me, I suppose, going, well, what does that mean for me? There was talk about, do we sell out to a corporate? How are we ever going to get some value back on, the last 20 years that our doctors have put into general practice? So from me, I sort of started talking about where do I want to go in the future for me, because I'd been working in general practice for 10 years by that stage, and I've never stayed in a job more than 3 years in my previous life, just because I've evolved and moved on, and that's just me. And I'm going, okay, if we ever think about selling out to a corporate, what do I need to do, and what does that mean for me, and do I need to be thinking about going somewhere else and moving? There's not a lot of opportunities, central, Queensland Health and things like that, which I never want to go back there. And I've gone, well, I'd hate to think this practice was bought out by a corporate. Like, that would change everything about who we are and what we stand for. And I've always felt I'd give 110% to this place. I've always felt like it's me. I spend the money as if it was my money. I make the decisions as if it affected me personally. That's how I approach things. So that started sort of my own discussion, going, well, maybe I could be an owner. I just put that into my head anyway. So long story long, after a lot of self sort of belly button gazing and working out whether that's something I wanted to do. I put it out there once, thinking, well, I don't want to see this practice dissolve. I don't want to see this practice turn into something that it's not. We're passionate about what we do. I want to see that continue. I want to be part of that. And that's not how we do things. This was ever only a general practice owned by GPs, and that's how it worked. But anyway, put it out there, and it took a lot of time to digest and think and sort through from our ownership group, and as well as myself. But I was also thinking, well, if I don't end up going into ownership, I probably need to think about what my personal next step is, because I may not always have a future here, and I really love this practice and want to be part of it. But if we decide to sell up and whatever, well, that probably isn't realistically what it is. And I do remember having a conversation with Paul Copeland about that in lead up to that strategic meeting, going, why would you want to be an owner in general practice? That's crazy. He didn't get it. That's okay. So yes, I put it out there, and we had a couple of one of the doctors was looking to exit at that point, but it wasn't, the timing didn't align, because she was looking to exit before they really made a decision about where I fat. And as I said, I've been with the business 10 years, or more. You know me, I know you, like, it's whether it's going to work or not. And, very much came from a mindset of GP owners, you just work harder if the business is in struggling, and not thinking about it from a business as such. So we were starting to develop up a business that had value and asset as such. So it was just a really different mindset. And it took a bit of time to digest, and yes, eventually they said, yep, I think that sounds like a great idea. We had to come up with a price as such, because I was buying in. And in the past, our business hadn't been worth much, but we've been working really hard, and our business was actually worth a lot more now. So I'm going, holy crap, how am I going to afford this? But it worked out. And one of the big issues was, because of the way our business operates, I didn't think I'd be able to get finance to buy into my share. Like, that really worried me, because it wasn't as if it was a weekly payment distribution of profits. Like, I didn't know. So I actually spoke to an accountant, and I actually went back to our owners and put a proposition on the table about whether they'd consider vendor finance. So, and they did. And so that means the business took the loan, so for me to buy in, and I pay that off, and they get the distribution of those funds as it comes through. So
amazing.
That's sort of how it sort of came about.
But
yeah, at the end of the day, it's yes, it was about having something that was mine, like that I'm part of, but it's more about not letting go of what we've worked so hard. Like, I was so fearful of us selling to a corporate. What would that look like moving forward? It makes me shiver to think about it.
Absolutely. And so you did something about it, as you always do, Julie. You worked out a solution. And so, in terms of now, you've got an extra site as well, right? So you've recently,
yeah.
So your fourth site. Tell us about that.
So, as I mentioned before, we'd made this big decision to go ahead and open up a practice. We didn't decide to open up a practice. We said we would have another 2 practices opened, one in Rocky, one in Yeppoon, by the end of our 3-year-ish plan. Well, we didn't actually say, we didn't know where exactly, but we thought that that's what we needed. Initially, we thought we needed another one in Yeppoon because we were at footprint, maximum footprint here, and we wanted to bring our skin clinic part into Yeppoon. But an opportunity presented itself, and you know what it's like when you're open to opportunities, they always present. An opportunity presented itself, and it was to buy a building, and we always have the land, we always have the building that we operate under. Anyway, it didn't work out. We didn't get the property. We were pipped at the post, and we were a bit dirty about that. But the opportunity, it just happened to be that we knew the person who bought it, and he was looking to lease it back. So we actually have leased that property back from him. We negotiated quite a nice deal that meant that he paid up for the refit. So I think actually we walked out of that pretty well. I think we paid $175,000 for that's it. And
wow.
Yep. I mean, our rent is reasonably high for central Queensland, but it's not unreasonable. I think it's about 400 a square metre. which is, I know that in comparison to urban is nothing, but that is a bit higher for Central Queensland. But yes, and it worked out, and it worked out really well because we had, as I said, open to opportunities, and opportunities come knocking. We heard that a local doctor was looking to go out on his own, wanted to be a sole practitioner. We're going, you are insane. And he was just a nice human being. I hadn't known him, but people had known him. And so we approached him, had a conversation, and he was like pinching himself all the time, going, you sure you want to work with me? Like he didn't believe he had it in him, and we didn't think he'd want to come and work for us, but he was just our ideal of where our future wants to go. Younger doctor, keen to be involved. He's just the perfect solution. So he came on board, and that's one of the things that we learnt with all our evolution of practices is that you need someone on site who's got skin in the game, that, otherwise everyone's faffing about as such. So it was really nice to have him as part of that. I suppose the future leader, he wants to buy into our business. He wants to be an owner and not too distant future. So he wanted to take some leadership with that as well. So, he's been helpful in helping to recruit doctors. So we had 2 doctors that came to us from another practice in town. They brought their patient load, which was amazing. We've had doctors that have shuffled around, and we've only been open 8 weeks, so we're slowly building numbers. And the practice, like, we just thought it would be another one of our other practices, but it's evolved quite differently up there. It's almost quite a premium practice for Central Queensland. 100% private billing for everything and high private billing rates for that. So it's taking a bit longer to build because of that, and we get that. But it's so lovely to hear. Like, I got a text message from one of my doctors last week who's gone, this is the best decision I ever made. So it was just such a nice feeling to know that they love working with us and we're delivering something that works for them and it works for us. And yeah, so it's all very exciting.
Awesome. So where are you at now with doctor numbers? So I think right at the beginning when we were talking at the beginning of this conversation, I think we were at like 8 or 9 with 6 or 7 of them as owners.
I haven't lost count, but I think it's about between 25 and 30. We've had a bit of a movement just of recent because of a number of, it's like anything, things come and go and whatnot. So we're building up numbers again, but I've got a couple of doctors coming this month, a couple of registrars starting, and then some people in the new year. So we never stop recruiting. Even I don't care if every room in this building is filled. I have a room roster and I don't care. We will make it work. We will make it work. And that it always does. It's always something comes together. So yeah.
Awesome. That's recruiting. Then the other thing that was clunky and a bit messy was processes. Where are we at with those now?
Look, we've come a long way, but that's my focus for the next 12 months and we're really trying to build in that accountability systems into our team, a lot more structure around who's doing what, and using technology better. And that's our real focus as a team at the moment. So it's not a one and done. It's not done, and it's going to take a long time, and it evolves. We've evolved significantly just even using technology in the last few, and our VAs and things like that. We've changed our rostering structure and things like that. We used to have 8 receptionists, now we have 5 or 6 because we have people working and we work differently. And in that time, we've reduced our staff but grown exponentially. So just doing things differently, learning how to do things, working smarter.
Nice. And then alignment. So that was off when this journey started. Where is it at now? How would you describe alignment among?
I think we've got a large group, so there's always going to be difficulty, but I think there's a lot of trust within the group that people feel like they can speak up if they've got concerns. And I do feel like we're on the same page about things. I mean, we don't do anything textbook, as in we don't have same page meetings. We try and have a meeting once a month, and it's been 2 months since we've had our last meeting for one reason or another. So, nothing is textbook or perfect, but it's working. And I think that everyone's getting their needs met. So that's why we're on the same trajectory, heading in the right direction. So it just works.
Absolutely. And so I suppose obviously there's many people involved in the business who are part of all the things you've done and are going to continue to do. But there's 2 of you in particular that I've had lots of time and interactions with. And one of them's not with us here today. And I think I thought he deserved his own future podcast if he'll indulge us. because I think it'll be a wonderful experience and learning for our audience. But I think we should have a word for your colleague and friend that you've alluded to, because it's someone that inspires me. So you've worked closely with Dr. Mick Donoghue, as well as everybody else involved, but I'm just talking about who I have
Absolutely,
met
yeah.
with. So I think it might just be useful just for you to share that part of your
Yeah.
journey.
Look, hands down, Michael is the reason I'm here. I would never have come into general practice other than him pestering me every couple of years. And I really liked how he worked when we were working in divisions land at the time. But I didn't expect this relationship as such, and I know that you guys talk about the visionary and the implementer, but I think if anyone, we are the classic example of that. He comes in, he's chasing whatever new fancy thing that's come around, and it's just about how do we put that into perspective and what we're going to do and whatever. And yeah, we just work really well. Once again, there is no perfect scenario. We don't sit down weekly and work on things or whatever the case is. I'm often just tapping, coming into his door and going, hey, I've got this problem or whatever, or he's in my room. It just works. But there's that mutual understanding, respect. We know that's going to happen. We also know where we stand. So, if I say no, it can't be done, I don't often say no, it can't be done, but we understand that, it can't be done or whatever the case is. So it's hilarious. I could laugh because no one else did. Whenever I went on holidays, I would say to stuff, do not agree to anything while I am away. Because it would happen. He'd go, and I think we need to do this. And go, no. So, yes. But we have a really good relationship in that respect. And he's an amazing person to work with. He has such a strategic mind. He's worked at so many levels within general practice and has a really good picture of where the future's going and what that looks like for us. And it's a really quite incredible, inspirational person to work with.
Absolutely. I was just thinking while you were talking, how could I describe him? I was going to say the walking definition of a growth mindset.
Absolutely. That is one of our core values, is in having a growth mindset. Yeah, that's so true. This is someone who, is been around the block a few times, and he makes sure he learns a new skill every year. He's always engaged in trying to better himself, the practice, and for his patients. It's incredible.
Absolutely. And so if you were looking back, which we are now, over the last 15 years, what would be some lessons that you would say, you've learned some, the most valuable lessons, and maybe some, what advice would you have for either your younger self, if you could get in that time machine and go back, or if there's someone listening or watching who's somewhere along the journey that you've shared so far, what lessons and advice would you give?
I don't know whether I would have been in the right headspace to have made the decision to become an earner any earlier than what I did. I think, and it might sound whatever, but I think my involvement with Scale My Clinic, and especially at a boardroom level, and some of the stuff with Mayout, we're really challenging the way we think and, what's holding us back, was probably part of that for me, because absolutely a case of imposter syndrome. It probably took me almost 12 months to lean into being an owner, and I was almost scared of letting people know that I'd bought in, what would they think, etc. Just that whole mindset change. And I don't think I could have done that before I did in reality. But from a lesson learnt, I didn't know I could work harder than what I did, and I work harder than I've ever done. And I thought I gave it 110% before. But I think the things that I think are at the detriment is you can't do it all yourself. And you need to build that supportive structure around you. And that's my goal, is that, I am invisible in the background in the future, that we've got teams that can work and just everything just happens. So I think that's really important, is making sure you build a structure around you to support you, because you cannot do it all. I think that balance is really important. I'm a big believer of balance, as you guys know, with trying to take time with my family and things like that. And I think balance has probably slipped a little bit for me since becoming an owner, because I feel like I have 60 employees and 25 doctors and 40,000 people in this community relying on me to deliver this service. I'm responsible, but I need to make sure that I don't burn out as well. And I think make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. And don't get me wrong, it might sound altruistic that I wanted to, keep what we've got, but it was also because I wanted to develop a business that I have ownership in and I have an income coming for it, for my future as well. So it's not always, those altruistic things. It's obviously a business decision as well. So yeah, that would probably be my big things, is making sure you do it for the right reasons as well. And whatever those right reasons are for you, I suppose. Yeah. I don't know if I actually answered your question very well.
No, any answer is a good answer, I would say. And so if we just went back to 5 years ago, where you started the last, so far, third of your leadership journey at Yeppoon, where are you at now compared to where you thought then that you could be at?
Oh, gosh. Well, I didn't think we'd be here, like, as I said before, and I don't know, I think I mentioned, we were excited that we made $100,000 profit. Well, we're probably 10 times that now. Well, maybe not. Yeah, no, yeah, maybe, 10 times that now. So, that gives us a bit of an insight into how much growth and develop. And we are far from doing things right. Like, there is so much better we can do in things. But yeah, we put a lot of investment. Our business is an asset now. Our business has value now. It never did in the past. Has significant value now, which is huge.
Absolutely. Julie, this has been one of my most enjoyable interviews that I've done on our podcast. You've really laid out your journey in such a beautiful, open way. And for me, it's been a pleasure to watch the last 5 years unfold. And I'm super excited to see what the next 5 years and beyond bring. Yourself, Mick, and the whole Yeppoon team are really just an absolute credit to our profession and your community. And yeah, it's just been amazing. And so thank you for sharing that.
We're just so grateful to have the support and coaching and the learning ourselves. That's been huge in professional development, but personal development as well.
Excellent. So we'll stop there. Julie Thomson, business manager and owner at Yeppoon Family Practice. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sachin. Cheers.